I never thought my neighborhood would turn into a crime scene. But it did, because of one person. The HOA president. A woman who thought rules and power meant more than people's lives. She literally sawed down my nephew's treehouse while he was still inside. And when I confronted her, her excuse. She called it removing an eyesore. But the only thing that got removed that day was my ability to stay calm when I watched my nephew loaded into an ambulance. Let me rewind. My name's Mark Hale. Most days, that name doesn't mean much, it's just something you scribble on bills or sign on forms. But on the day the world crashed down on my nephew, that name meant everything. Because I was the guy standing there, the one who had to pick up the pieces. See, my sister is a mom. Worrying? That's her job. My job, ever since I got out of the army and moved in to help out, has been to keep things steady. Her husband works out of state most of the year. So day to day, it's just me, her, and my 8-year-old nephew, Evan. That morning started perfectly. The sun was warm, the smell of fresh-cut pine hung in the air, and Evan, my self-appointed foreman, was full of more energy than an entire platoon. We were building his dream, a real treehouse, tucked between two sturdy oaks near the lake. Not some rickety project thrown together with nails and plywood. No, we used solid 4x4 posts, heavy deck screws, and every ounce of patience I had. He'd line up the boards, I'd mark the cuts. He'd start a screw, I'd finish it with the drill. Together, we turned a pile of lumber into something magical. By midday, we had walls, a crooked little window Evan designed himself, and a floor strong enough to hold a squad. He named it Fort Kickbutt. My sister hated the name, too rough, she said. But I told her every fort needs a name that scares off enemies. Little did I know our biggest enemy wasn't imaginary. She lived 3 houses down. Karen Dunn. The HOA president. Karen believed a neighborhood was perfect only when every yard looked cloned from a magazine, every blade of grass uniform, every flower approved, every mailbox identical. So to her, our fort, our masterpiece, wasn't a child's dream. It was a violation. A threat to property values. She'd been leaving us notes for weeks, angry little things, tucked under our mat in slanted handwriting. I'd read them, fold them up neatly, then toss them into the grill to help start the charcoal. Her stationery was expensive, but I figured I had more patience than she had paper. That Saturday, she escalated. She didn't leave a note. She marched right onto the edge of our lawn. Power suit, high heels, even on a Saturday. She looked absurd standing in sawdust and sunlight. Mark, she barked, her voice like gravel in a blender, this is your final warning. That thing violates 17 covenants. Evan froze, hammer in hand, his eyes darting to me. I gave him a little nod. It's okay. 17? I said, keeping my voice calm. Impressive, Karen. Must have taken you all night to find that many rules. Her lips tightened. This is a formal notice. Dismantle it in 24 hours, or the association will take action. I just picked up a 2x4, checked it for straightness. And what action would that be? Another angry note? A $50 fine? Her finger shot out, blood-red nail aimed at the fort. This neighborhood has standards. That eyesore drags down property values. I thought about my time overseas. Real problems. Real stakes. And here was this woman, acting like a kid's fort was an act of war. It's for my nephew, I said evenly. It's not hurting anyone. Leave it alone. She huffed, spun on her heel, and stormed back to her pristine, joyless home. Evan looked up at me, his voice small. Is she gonna break our fort, Uncle Mark? I put a hand on his shoulder. Nobody's breaking anything, buddy. She's just full of hot air. Now grab me that board, we're putting the roof on. For the next hour, we worked. Evan played king of his castle, declaring laws about mandatory ice cream and no bedtime. I laughed, marking beams for the rafters. And then, I heard it. A sound that still makes my stomach twist. A saw. Not my saw. I turned, and there she was, Karen Dunn, back again. Only this time, she wasn't armed with rules or paper. She was holding a reciprocating saw, its blade screaming silver as it chewed into one of the main support posts of the fort. My blood went cold. Karen! Stop! Evan's inside. I shouted, sprinting toward her. But she didn't stop. Her face was locked in grim determination, eyes fixed on the wood like she was erasing a mistake. The fort groaned. The post cracked. And then, Evan screamed. Not the playful kind. A raw, terrified scream. The structure twisted, shuddered, and collapsed in a heap of shattered wood and dust. And my nephew was buried underneath it. They claimed my nephew's fort was an eyesore. That it ruined the natural view buyers wanted to see from the lakefront homes. The real estate agent panicked and ran to Karen. And Karen, ever the problem solver, for herself, promised she'd handle it personally. When I opened the envelope Arthur handed me, my blood ran cold. Inside weren't just letters. It was a paper trail. Emails, text messages, backroom deals, all pointing to one thing. Karen Dunn wasn't protecting the HOA, she was protecting her own payday. One text stood out: need to clear the view at 3:10. The Ford is unapproved. Direct action tomorrow morning. Consider the sightlines clean. Another: bonus is contingent on a clear view. I'll handle it. Tell the buyers to have their checkbook ready. Not a single word about safety. Not one mention of the fact that kids played in that Ford every day. It wasn't about HOA rules. It wasn't even about neighborhood aesthetics. It was about money. Cold, hard, cash. Karen didn't see a child's playhouse. She saw an obstacle blocking her $10,000 side deal. And she was willing to risk my nephew's life for it. For the first time, everything clicked. This wasn't some power-drunk HOA president throwing her weight around. This was calculated. This was criminal. The anger that washed over me wasn't explosive, it was sharp, almost calm. The kind of fury that comes when you finally understand the why. Arthur sat across from me, wringing his hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have told you sooner. I was scared." I looked at him. He wasn't a villain. Just a weak man who finally chose to do the right thing. "You did the right thing now," I told him, standing. "And that matters." I tucked the envelope under my arm. That stack of papers wasn't just evidence, it was a weapon. A weapon that elevated this case from reckless negligence to premeditated greed. Karen Dunn hadn't just broken HOA bylaws. She had broken the law itself. And now, I had the proof. I walked into the afternoon sun knowing one thing for certain: this was no longer about Evan's broken leg. This was about dismantling Karen's entire corrupt empire. The DA's office didn't hesitate. I laid the documents in front of Prosecutor Miss Davies, and the moment she read them, her eyes burned with fire. "This," she said, tapping the texts, "is the ball game." Charges were immediately escalated. Felony assault. Criminal intent for financial gain. Serious time. But while the criminal system churned slowly forward, we had another battle to fight: Evan's recovery. His surgeries, his therapy, the mountain of medical bills piling up on my sister's table. That's where insurance was supposed to come in. If your neighbor's negligence hurts someone, their homeowner's policy pays. That's standard. So we filed the claim. Slam dunk, right? Weeks later, a thick envelope arrived. I opened it expecting a check, or at least questions. Instead, denial. The letter boiled down to two brutal words: willful act. Insurance covers accidents, I explained to my sister. Burst pipes, storm damage, slips and falls. The oops moments of life. But Karen didn't make a mistake. She made a choice. She grabbed a saw, and she cut down that Ford on purpose. And insurance doesn't cover crime. No safety net. No corporate payout. Just Karen, standing alone, facing the financial fallout. Strangely, it was a victory. It meant every cent for Evan's recovery would have to come directly from Karen Dunn's pocket. But cornered people are dangerous. And Karen was about to prove just how dangerous she could be. The HOA boardroom was packed that night. The motion on the table was simple: keep Karen, and the association loses its insurance coverage. That line landed like a brick. Arthur called the vote. Hands went up, one by one. 3 in favor of removing her. Her last ally stared at the floor, then slowly raised his hand too. The gavel came down. Audit approved. Karen Dunn removed. And just like that, the fear that had gripped our neighborhood for years drifted away, like smoke through a vent. But while the HOA had finally cut her loose, Karen's biggest battle was still ahead. The criminal trial was the state's business, a slow train grinding its way toward judgment. For my family, the more urgent fight was the civil trial. That was where we would hold Karen accountable for the real cost of her greed, Evan's surgeries, his nightmares, and the long road back to normal. Our lawyer, Ben Carter, was steady, methodical, the kind of man who never raised his voice but commanded attention anyway. He explained the difference to us: in criminal court, they need proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In civil court, we just need to show the scale tips toward us. Preponderance of the evidence. And with what we have, we can tip it like a boulder. The trial began in a small, modern courtroom. Karen was escorted in from the county jail, no orange jumpsuit this time, just a plain gray suit that did nothing to hide how much smaller she seemed. The aura of authority was gone. She looked ordinary. Ben started with the foundation, the HOA bylaws. He walked the jury through them line by line. Rules existed, yes. But they had a process: warnings, fines, hearings. At no point did those rules give a president the right to take a saw to a resident's property. That was key. She hadn't just acted with malice. She had acted outside her own authority. Then came the evidence. The jury watched the doorbell camera footage projected on a massive screen. Silence filled the room as the fort wavered, buckled, and came crashing down. You could hear people gasp when the structure pinned Evan beneath it. Next came Deputy Torres's bodycam audio, Karen's own voice admitting what she did, trying to justify it with flimsy excuses. Then, Mrs. Gwynn took the stand. Calm, steady, grandmotherly. She told the jury exactly what she saw that day, her words simple, her tone unshakable. She was the perfect witness. But the most powerful testimony wasn't live. It was recorded. Evan's deposition. On screen, he sat in a chair, his little red cast propped on a stool. His voice was small, but clear. My name's Evan. I'm 8. He talked about Fort Kickbutt, how he and I had built it together, how it was the best fort ever. His face lit up remembering it. Then Ben asked softly, Evan, can you tell us what happened to your fort? Evan's smile faded. He looked down at his cast. The shaky lady came, he said, that's what he called Karen now. She had a buzzing thing. She cut the fort's leg. It got wobbly. Then it fell on me. Did it hurt? Evan nodded. Yeah. A lot. His eyes welled with tears. The video ended. Not a single juror stayed dry-eyed. The defense scrambled, throwing out weak arguments. Karen was stressed. The fort was unsafe. I was negligent. But it didn't matter. The jury had seen Evan. They had heard his truth. 2 days of testimony ended with closing arguments. Ben's final words echoed through the courtroom. This was not an accident. This was a choice. A choice made for money. Now you, the jury, must make a choice of your own, the choice to hold her accountable. The jury left. Less than an hour later, they returned. The foreman, a weathered construction worker, looked Karen Dunn dead in the eye. On the question of liability, we find in favor of the plaintiff. Relief washed through me like a tide. We had won. Then came the damages. $150,000 for medical expenses. $500,000 for pain and suffering. And $1 million in punitive damages, to make sure no one ever tried something like this again. Karen slumped in her chair, pale as ash. Her reputation, her freedom, her finances, gone in one strike. It wouldn't erase Evan's scar or his nightmares, but it was justice. Real, undeniable justice. The next morning was different. Quiet. Peaceful. For the first time in months, the air felt light. Karen was gone, her house already stripped of its power and marked with a foreclosure sign. But in our yard, there was still an empty space. A patch of flattened grass where Fort Kickbutt had once stood. I promised Evan we'd rebuild it, stronger this time. I thought it would just be me and him, a quiet project. I was wrong. Paul showed up first, circular saw in hand. Figured you could use some help. Then Buddy Bruno came trundling down the sidewalk with a wheelbarrow full of concrete. No posts in dirt this time, Mark. We're doing it right, foundation first. And then they kept coming. Neighbors with lumber, tools, kids eager to carry scraps. Mrs. Gwynn with lemonade and cookies, declaring herself morale officer. By noon, the whole street was out there. We weren't just rebuilding a fort. We were reclaiming our neighborhood. Even off-duty Deputy Torres arrived, carrying a box of heavy-duty carriage bolts. The guys at the station pitched in, he said. If you're gonna build it to last. All day we worked. Laughter, stories, the smell of fresh-cut wood in the air. Evan, unable to lift much, was named chief inspector. He sat in a lawn chair with a toy hard hat, pointing at our work. That board's super straight, Uncle Mark. Good job, Mr. Bruno. That concrete's really, concretey. By sunset, it stood tall, Fort Kickbutt 2.0. Bigger. Stronger. Post set in concrete, frame bound with steel, a rope ladder, a deck, and a roof capped with a bright red plank signed by Evan himself. He climbed up, cast and all, and stood proudly on the deck, grinning at the neighbors below. Thank you, he shouted. The cheer that erupted was louder than any gavel or verdict. This wasn't just a fort anymore. It was a monument. Proof that when one person tries to tear a community down, a dozen more will rise to build it back stronger. The healing had begun.